You are holding a piece of paper. It has no nutrition, no warmth. It cannot shelter you from rain. If you were stranded on an island, it would be worth exactly nothing, kindling at best. And yet, somewhere on the other side of the planet, a stranger you will never meet has agreed in advance to hand over food, shelter, even years of their own labor in exchange for it. That agreement is invisible. You cannot see it, you cannot touch it. But it governs almost every action you take today. Most people think money is a thing. It isn't. It never was. 10,000 years ago, there was no such agreement. A person with grain and a person with fish had to want each other's exact goods, at the exact same moment, in the exact right quantity, or the trade simply didn't happen. Economists have a clinical name for this failure. They call it the double coincidence of wants. But the failure wasn't clinical. It was constant. It was daily. It was the quiet friction underneath every human relationship that involved exchange, and for thousands of years, it shaped who got to eat and who didn't. Something had to give. And what emerged in response wasn't a government, wasn't a bank, wasn't even a decision in the way we understand decisions. It was a pattern, the same pattern discovered independently on nearly every continent by people who had never spoken to one another. That should unsettle you a little, because it means what came next wasn't culture. It was something closer to instinct. In West Africa, it was shells, small, spiraled, and impossible to counterfeit by hand. In ancient Rome, it was salt, so precious that soldiers were partially paid in it, a fact still buried, unnoticed, inside the word we use for a paycheck today. In Mesoamerica, it was cacao, a currency you could, if desperate enough, eat. In parts of East Africa, it was cattle, not symbolically, actually. Wealth walked on four legs and could die and could be stolen in the night. The word we now use for financial wealth, capital, descends from the Latin word for head, because a man's fortune was once counted the same way you'd count a herd. Notice what these objects had in common. Not gold, not paper, not government seals. Scarcity, durability, divisibility, desire. Whatever the culture, whatever the century, whatever the continent, human beings kept independently reinventing the same four properties, as if searching for a shape that already existed in the mind before it existed in the hand. This is the part historians rarely say out loud. Money wasn't invented, it was discovered. Metal solved a problem shells and salt could not. Gold does not rot, silver does not spoil. You cannot eat either one, which, strangely, made them more trustworthy, not less. A currency that satisfies hunger invites its own destruction. A currency that satisfies nothing survives. But raw metal carried its own quiet danger. Every transaction demanded a scale, and every scale invited doubt. Was this truly pure silver? Was this truly the weight it claimed to be? Every trade became a small negotiation with suspicion. Then, in the 7th century BCE, in the kingdom of Lydia, someone did something that would outlive their name, their language, and their empire. They stamped the metal, a mark, an image, a guarantee pressed into the material itself, so that trust no longer had to be measured. It could simply be recognized. This is the moment worth sitting with. Because the stamp did not change the metal. It changed belief. And belief, once it could be mass-produced, spread faster than any army. Coins moved through Persia, through Greece, through Rome, through China, not because people admired the artistry, but because a stranger 1,000 miles from home would look at the mark and simply know. Power noticed this immediately. A ruler's face on a coin didn't just pay for bread. It traveled into homes an army could never reach. It sat in the palm of a peasant's hand, whispering who was in charge, long after the emperor who minted it was dead. Money had stopped being a tool. It had become a message. But even a message has weight, and gold, it turns out, is heavy in every sense of the word. Enough coin to buy a house could not be carried in a house. And so, quietly, in the ledgers of Tang Dynasty China, something almost imperceptible happened. A shift so subtle that almost no one at the time understood what they were witnessing. Merchants began exchanging paper, not currency, receipts, promises that real metal sat, untouched, somewhere else. At first, this seems like a convenience, a shortcut. It wasn't. It was the first time in human history that value was allowed to separate from matter entirely. The first time an object was worth something, not because of what it was, but because of what it represented. Centuries later, in Europe, goldsmiths, men who were simply meant to guard other people's gold, noticed something they were never supposed to notice. Not everyone came back for their gold at once. And in that gap, in that quiet arithmetic between what people owned and what they actually needed on any given day, an entire financial civilization was born. Quietly, almost accidentally, without a single vote, without a single law. They began issuing more paper than gold they held. They began lending the difference, at interest. This is the moment the story stops being about metal and starts being about something far stranger. Trust, once discovered to be profitable, was never left alone again. Governments, watching this unfold, did what governments do with anything powerful and ungoverned. They took it. The Bank of England, in 1694, became one of the first to centralize this new form of trust, paper-backed officially by gold reserves. Nation after nation followed, until most of the world operated under a single, quiet agreement. Your currency was only as real as the metal sitting, largely untouched, in a vault somewhere you would never see. For over 2 centuries, that agreement held. Then, in 1944, at a hotel in Bretton Woods, the architecture of the entire global economy was redrawn. The world's currencies were pegged to the American dollar. The American dollar was pegged to gold. One thread, connecting nearly every transaction on Earth, back to a single metal held in a single place. In 1971, that thread was cut. Facing economic pressure, an American president severed the dollar from gold, not with ceremony, but with a television announcement lasting a few minutes. And in that moment, almost unnoticed by the people whose lives it would define, money became something it had never fully been before. Nothing, backed by nothing physical, nothing you could hold, weigh, or bury in a field. Only belief. Only the agreement, endlessly renewed, that a government's promise was still worth keeping. Sit with that. Every transaction you make today rests on a foundation that isn't gold, isn't property, isn't anything solid at all. It rests on a story everyone has silently agreed to keep telling. Then the story changed shape again. Plastic replaced paper. Numbers replaced plastic. By the final years of the 20th century, most money on Earth no longer existed in any physical form whatsoever. It existed as electrical patterns, shifting silently between databases, never once touched by a human hand. And in 2008, in the aftermath of a financial collapse that revealed just how fragile centralized trust could be, an anonymous figure published 9 pages that proposed something almost unthinkable: a currency with no center at all. No bank, no government, no vault. Just mathematics and a public ledger no single person could secretly alter. Whether this experiment endures, fades, or transforms into something we don't yet have a name for, it doesn't really matter, because it proves the same truth every previous chapter already proved, quietly, over and over again, for 10,000 years. Money was never the shells, never the salt, never the gold, the paper, the plastic, or the code. Money was always a mirror. Every object we've ever chosen to represent value has simply reflected what we, as a species, were capable of trusting at that moment in our history. A tribe trusting a shell, an empire trusting a stamp, a nation trusting a promise, a network trusting an algorithm none of us fully understand. Which leaves an uncomfortable question, one this story never quite lets you leave behind. If money has never been the object, only the agreement behind it, then somewhere out there, quietly, right now, A new agreement is already forming, and none of us yet can see its shape.